It was the still hush of January, right in the middle of winter's quiet grip, when everything began to shift. Outside, the streets of Boulder, Colorado were blanketed in snow, soft and untouched, but inside, my thoughts stirred with warmth and movement. My son, Jacob, had just turned 19. He was an artist with a remarkable sense for emotion, his sketchbooks brimming with scenes that seemed to breathe. The attic had long ago become his studio, a space he transformed with canvases stacked against walls, paintbrushes strewn about in coffee mugs, and floors dotted with color. He poured himself into his work in ways that often reminded me of the things his father could never offer: focus, presence, and care. My husband was often distant, buried in his own distractions that kept him away more than they brought him close. That morning, I sat at the kitchen table wrapped in a blanket, a steaming mug nestled between my palms. The cold always found its way through the old windows this time of year, no matter how high we set the thermostat. I hadn't seen Jacob before bed the night prior. He'd been lost in his art again, and I didn't have the heart to pull him away from it. "Morning, Mom," came his voice as the familiar creak of the stairs signaled his arrival. He had a painting tucked under his arm and a cup of tea in hand. His curls were a bit messy, his eyes bright and alert despite the faint sleep still resting on his face. "Good morning, honey," I said, smiling as he leaned the canvas gently against a counter. "Were you up all night again?" Jacob gave a playful shrug. "Kinda. Got into a flow. Want to see?" My curiosity piqued. I nodded, and he turned the painting to face me. It was a stunning study of a figure, a moment caught mid-movement, lit as if kissed by soft afternoon sun. The lines held emotion, the posture spoke of strength and fragility both. It was so human, so personal. "This is amazing, Jacob," I said quietly, my eyes tracing the detail. "You really have something special." His face flushed with modesty, and he dropped his gaze to the floor. "Thanks, Mom. Couldn't do any of this without you." There was a stillness between us then, comforting, familiar. Over time, in the spaces left by his father's long absences, Jacob and I had built something more than routine. A rhythm, a presence. Later that afternoon, as I passed the stairs, I couldn't resist peeking into the studio. He stood near the window, brush in hand, the light catching his profile as he worked with quiet precision. When he noticed me, he gave a half smile. "Spying on me?" he teased. "Couldn't help it," I admitted, stepping inside. "You've got me curious now." He gestured to the easel beside him, revealing a new piece in progress, an intricate study of hands, each one positioned to express a different feeling. "These are so alive," I murmured, studying the delicate detail. "I'm thinking of doing a series," he said, eyes on the canvas. "Telling stories through posture and touch." "You always see things so deeply," I said, pride swelling in my chest. He looked over at me again, and for a beat, his gaze lingered. That quiet stillness returned, something that had existed before unspoken, but never crossed. It reminded me of how closely we had leaned on each other, how his presence had filled the spaces I used to leave empty. As January wore on, Jacob's work evolved, and we shared more quiet dinners and afternoon chats by the fire. The house, once too quiet, seemed filled with something gentler now, a comfort I hadn't realized I was missing. That evening was particularly quiet. Snow dusted the windows, and the world outside felt like a painting in grayscale. My husband had gone out, he usually did, with bowling nights that seemed more like an excuse to be elsewhere. Jacob and I had stayed behind. He'd been unusually warm all day, kind words, small jokes, and an attentiveness that didn't go unnoticed. "Mom, you've got this gift," he said earlier as I stirred something on the stove. I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of gift?" He leaned in the kitchen doorway, a teasing smile on his face. "The way you make a space feel like it matters. It's something people chase their whole lives." I gave a soft laugh, brushing it off as just another sweet thing to say. But the way he said it stayed with me, like he wasn't just complimenting me, but recognizing something I hadn't seen in myself for a long time. That evening, the fire cast a gentle glow across the living room as I sat on the couch, thumbing through a magazine. The day had been quiet, the kind that settles into your bones and makes you grateful for small comforts. Then Jacob stepped out from his studio, a box in his hands, his expression lit with a spark of excitement. "Mom, I've got an idea," he said, placing the box carefully on the coffee table. "What's this about?" I asked, setting the magazine aside. He motioned toward it. "Go on, open it." Inside was a red satin robe, deep, rich, and glistening softly in the firelight. My breath caught for a moment. "Jacob, what is this?" He shifted his weight, looking uncharacteristically serious. "I've been thinking about starting a portrait series, something that captures warmth, presence, and elegance. I want to start with you. Would you let me paint you?" I looked down at the robe, heart beating a little faster. "You want me to wear this?" He nodded. "Just for the painting. I think it would bring the mood I'm going for. But only if you're comfortable." There was something in the way he asked, sincere, creative, driven, that made me say yes. "Okay," I said quietly. "Let's do it." His face lit up. "Awesome. Get changed, and I'll set up." Upstairs, I slipped into the robe. The satin was cool at first, then settled like a second skin. When I glanced at myself in the mirror, I didn't see a tired woman or just someone's mother. I saw something softer, more assured. When I came back down, Jacob had transformed the space. A chair sat angled toward the fireplace, wrapped in a wool blanket. His easel stood nearby, and the room glowed in a halo of golden light. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, eyes meeting mine. I settled into the chair as he lifted his brush, his movements confident, precise. "Try to stay still," he murmured playfully. "Not that you need much direction." I smiled, the fire warming more than just the air around us. "You're laying it on thick tonight." He shrugged, not looking away from the canvas. "Just telling the truth. You've always had this calm strength about you. I want to show that." The room filled with silence again, soft, thoughtful silence, filled only with the light scratch of brush on canvas. "Do you remember," Jacob asked after a while, "how I used to draw you when I was little? Crayon stick figures with wild hair." I laughed. "Of course. I kept all of them. You used to hand them to me like they were gallery pieces." He paused his work, his voice quiet. "You were always my favorite subject. Still are." His words lingered. Something in his tone, in the stillness of that moment, felt deeper than I could name. I didn't respond right away, just watched him, my heart full. When he finally stepped back, he gave a satisfied nod. "That's it." I rose and joined him, looking at the canvas. It was more than a painting. He had captured something internal, strength, softness, reflection. "It's stunning," I whispered. Jacob looked at me, his voice low. "Thank you for trusting me." That night, as I lay beneath soft covers, the image of the portrait filled my mind. It wasn't just about the painting. It was about being seen, fully, clearly, by him. Morning came softly. Before I even sat up, the smell of coffee reached me. Jacob entered, a mug in one hand, a flower in the other. "Morning, Muse," he said, his voice light and warm. "You've earned some room service." Still waking, I smiled. "You're spoiling me." He placed the mug beside me. "You've done more for me than you know. I'm just trying to return a little of it." "Exactly," he said with a smile, settling gently on the edge of the bed as he extended the flower toward me. His features softened as he looked at me, not just with affection, but with deep admiration that made something stir inside me. "You've always been at the heart of what inspires me. I don't think I've ever felt this connected to my work or to someone." His words caught me off guard, stealing my breath with the quiet power behind them. The sincerity in his voice slipped past all my usual defenses. Before I could find a response, he gently raised my hand and pressed a soft kiss to it, a gesture full of care, not ceremony. "There's more," he added with a playful glint in his eye. "But you'll have to wait until tonight." Just promise me you won't peek into the studio. It's a surprise, and trust me, Dad wouldn't get it. His words sent a quiet rush through me. A blend of excitement and uncertainty blooming in my chest. What kind of surprise? I asked, my voice coming out quieter than I expected. Jacob gave a low laugh as he stood. You'll find out soon enough. I just need to get a few things ready. But I promise, you're going to love it. And just like that, he was gone, leaving behind the warm mug, the flower now resting in my lap, and a quiet whirlwind of thoughts I wasn't sure how to untangle. The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. His words echoed in my mind, looping with every glance he'd given me, every gentle gesture. I felt light, almost dizzy, like a schoolgirl grappling with a fluttering heart, but underneath it all was a quiet tension I couldn't ignore. Jacob wasn't just anyone, he was my son. Still, the way he regarded me, so attentively, so genuinely, stirred something I hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't just see a mother or a wife. In his eyes, I was something more, someone whole. As the evening drew closer, the anticipation became harder to ignore. I kept my hands busy with dinner, poured 2 glasses of wine, and tried not to dwell too long on what the night might hold. But by the time I finally walked down the hall to Jacob's studio, my heart was fluttering with a mix of nerves and curiosity. The door eased open with a faint creak. There he stood, surrounded by the creative chaos of his workspace, paint-streaked cloths, brushes, sketches half-taped to the walls. Yet something about him was different tonight. He looked composed, intent. In his hands was a small, striking box, deep crimson, catching the low light like a spark. I was hoping you'd come, he said, his tone soft but certain. Come on in. I stepped inside and gently closed the door behind me. The space was aglow with ambient light, the scent of oils and turpentine lingering under the quiet melody of instrumental music drifting from a speaker. In the center of the room was a chair draped in soft fabric, clearly arranged with purpose. Jacob nodded toward it, then extended the box to me. Open it, he said, his eyes bright with anticipation. With trembling fingers, I opened it to reveal a sleek leather outfit, a pair of cat ears, black lingerie, and even a small tail. A flush rose to my cheeks as I looked up, momentarily unsure of what to say. You're my muse, Jacob said, his voice low and sincere. I want to show you the way I see you, bold, strong, and completely yourself. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment settle between us. But his gaze, steady, unwavering, full of quiet admiration, left no room for doubt. I nodded, standing slowly and taking the box with both hands before slipping behind the screen he'd set up near the back of the studio. As I changed, the fabric hugged me in a way that felt unexpected, exposed, yes, but also powerful, like stepping into another version of myself. When I emerged, the look on Jacob's face stopped me in my tracks. His eyes widened slightly, then softened with a smile that said more than words could. You're perfect, he murmured, motioning for me to return to the chair. Completely perfect. With practiced calm, he adjusted the lighting and music, shifting his easel just so, before taking up his charcoal. The room fell into a hush, broken only by the quiet scrape of his strokes across the canvas and the occasional breath of approval as he worked. I watched him in stillness, his expression focused, his movements fluid. There was something almost meditative in the way he translated vision into line, form into emotion. There was something intimate about the way he looked at me, studying every curve, every shadow, as though I were the most fascinating subject he had ever encountered. As the evening wore on, something shifted, subtle but impossible to ignore. Jacob's compliments became more personal, his tone softer, layered with an affection that felt both familiar and newly complicated. Though I sensed we were inching towards something fragile, I didn't pull away. I couldn't. By the time he laid his charcoal down, a quiet understanding had formed between us. He approached slowly, his gaze holding mine with a rare kind of intensity. Thank you, he said quietly, for letting me see like this, for trusting me with it. A wave of emotion stirred in my chest, but the words to match it escaped me. Instead, I reached for his hand, fingers wrapping around his. It was a gesture filled with all the gratitude, all the connection I couldn't yet name. For a moment, the studio held its breath around us, two people suspended in something profound and unnamed. That night, long after I'd returned to my room, I lay awake with thoughts tumbling like soft thunder. The portrait, the stillness, his voice. It all replayed in quiet echoes. Whatever this was, this shift, this bond. It felt like a new chapter neither of us had expected, but somehow both needed. My phone buzzed gently beside me, breaking the silence. I reached for it and read the message. "Can't sleep. Thank you for tonight." I smiled faintly, fingers hovering over the screen before I typed back. "Me neither. It meant more than you know." My breath caught as I read his message, just a few quiet words, yet they carried more weight than I could explain. I stared at the screen for a long moment, torn between hesitation and something deeper, something that had been building quietly between us. Before I could second-guess myself, I was out of bed, the blanket falling away as I moved without thinking, drawn by something unspoken. The house was cloaked in stillness, every step down the hallway marked by the soft groan of the wooden floor beneath my feet. When I opened the door to the studio, Jacob was sitting on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped together, a quiet tension in his posture. He looked up as I stepped in, his eyes searching mine, not nervously, but with something raw and open. "Mom," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know, do you feel it too? The way I do." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I knew what he was asking, and though I tried to deny it to myself, I couldn't lie to him. Not when his gaze held mine, with such raw honesty. "Yes," I admitted softly, my voice trembling. "I do." A wave of relief washed over his face, and he stood up, closing the distance between us with quick steps. "You are always more than just my mom," he murmured into my skin, his voice thick with emotion. "You were everything to me." I closed my eyes, stunned by the intensity of the moment. His arms pulled me into a hug that felt like the world had melted away, leaving just the two of us. After a moment, he pulled back slightly, his hands still on my shoulders. "I have an idea," he said, his tone changing to something lighter, more playful. "While Dad's asleep, let's do something else. Something just for us." "Paint therapy," Jacob said, a glint of playfulness in his eyes. "It's how I process things through touch, color, texture. I've been wanting to try it with someone, and honestly, there's no one I'd trust more with this than you." His words surprised me, not just the idea, but the sincerity behind them. This wasn't a casual art project. It meant something to him, and I could feel that meaning settle in the space between us. "All right," I said with a soft smile, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. "Show me." Jacob's face lit up, boyish and warm. He moved quickly, gathering jars of rich, vibrant paint, ruby reds, cobalt blues, golds that shimmered even in the dim light. He unrolled a wide stretch of canvas across the studio floor and laid out towels along the edges. As he set everything up, he spoke with a kind of quiet joy, like someone inviting you into their sanctuary. "There's no technique," he said, placing the last jar down. "No pressure. Just emotion. Let it be messy. Let it be honest." He poured the paints directly onto the canvas, letting them swirl and bleed into each other, a kaleidoscope of expression and motion. Then he extended his hand toward me. "Come on," he said, his voice gentle, coaxing. "Let's make something that feels like now." I paused, heart fluttering for reasons I couldn't fully explain. Then I reached out and took his hand. Together, we knelt at the edge of the canvas, dipping our fingertips into the paint, dragging streaks of color across the surface. At first, it was lighthearted, brushes of red across his forearm, a smear of gold on my wrist. We laughed quietly, our hands becoming covered in color, our motions quick and spontaneous. But slowly, something shifted. The strokes grew slower, more intentional. The space between laughter stretched out into something quieter, something more reflective. Jacob's fingers moved with care now, his gestures thoughtful as he traced arcs and symbols into the paint. "You don't need to hold back," he said, his voice soft. "It's not about what it looks like. It's about what it holds." I nodded, pressing my palm into a pool of blue and sweeping it gently through the center of the canvas. The sensation, cool, textured, freeing, opened something in me I hadn't realized was closed. The room was still except for the music humming low in the background and the rhythmic breath between movements. This was vulnerability, but not the kind that left you exposed. It was the kind that let you be seen and accepted in every messy, colorful part. Jacob's hands moved gently, his touch deliberately drawing intricate patterns on my skin. "You're beautiful," he said softly, looking into my eyes. "Every bit of you." I felt a blush rise to my cheeks, but instead of pulling away, I leaned into his touch, letting the moment envelop us. I reached out, tracing a golden line around his collarbone, watching the paint glisten on his skin. As the session came to a quiet close, we found ourselves lying side by side on the canvas, our clothes and skin streaked with paint like living brushstrokes. The room glowed softly in the warm studio light, the smell of oils and color still lingering in the air. Jacob turned his head toward me, his features relaxed, open. "Thank you," he said, his voice low and sincere, "for showing up, for trusting me with this." I looked over at him, my heart strangely full, something peaceful unfolding in my chest. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. We stayed there for a while, saying nothing, just breathing, surrounded by the quiet hum of the space we had created together. Something raw, something honest, something entirely ours. Later that night, after I'd cleaned up and climbed into bed, sleep didn't come quickly. I lay beneath the covers, watching the shadows dance across the ceiling, replaying every moment in my mind, the warmth of the paint on my skin, the rhythm of our movements, the way Jacob had looked at me not just as an artist, but as a person. It wasn't just art. It was release. It was healing. And somehow, it had left me feeling more whole than I'd felt in years. Jacob was not just my son. He was a man, strong, passionate, and full of life. And though the connection we had built was anything but ordinary, I couldn't deny the depth of what we shared.